Chapter 12, First Day and Friends. Bakugou looked over at Hikage, his gaze furrowed. Izuku should be fronting. It's his first day, not yours, he said, walking beside him from the train. He had been mostly silent up until now, allowing Hikage to get a few moments of rest. Hikage shook his head, adjusting the kid's backpack over his shoulder. I agree, he said simply, continuing the walk. The number of people was dwindling the closer they got to the school, adults replaced by other children. Do you ever say more than one word? Hikage nodded, looking over at the boy. That was 2. His face flared in rage before he burst out laughing. You're a fucking asshole, he laughed, smacking his back. Hikage yelped at the suddenness, stumbling forward. He didn't have the same reflexes the others did, and being without his quirk, it never felt better. He felt naked. Please don't, he asked, standing still to get his bearings back. Bakugou laughed, throwing his head back as he did so. No chance, jackass. Not until you give Izuku his first day back. Hikage shook his head as he bit his lip. I can't. I know, Bakugou mumbled. You all made the same excuse that he doesn't want to friend, but he needs to. Get that fucker in therapy, he grumbled. You first, Hikage responded. He heard the slight grumble and speed up in the next instant. As the footsteps behind him grew louder, he grinned, booking it down the street. Students called out in surprise as he moved past them, through the gates and up the front of the stairs. He didn't move fast enough, and with no danger sense to warn him, he didn't feel it coming. Bakugou's backpack hit his back, and he screamed in surprise, tripping over his feet. He froze up, his hands locked on the backpack to stop it from going over his head. This was it. He had made it to the front steps. The next instant, he was hovering an inch off the floor, the concrete ready to break his nose. Are you all right? A kind voice asked, grabbing his shoulders and setting him upright. He blinked in shock as she tapped her hands together, and his backpack's weight came back. He stumbled back into Bakugou, who grumbled, shoving him off and grabbed his own backpack. Sorry, I thought it would be bad luck to fall on the first day, the girl in front of him said, her brown hair in a bob. Oh, you're that boy from the entrance exam, she said quickly, bouncing onto her toes. His gaze narrowed as he tried to place who she was. He hadn't been paying much attention to the test, not one for fighting or any sorts of tests. The girl did not look at all familiar to him compared to any of the other girls walking around. Bakugou punched his shoulder, raising an eyebrow at him. You gonna answer? That wasn't me, Hikage said truthfully, shrugging off, not knowing who she was. The girl stared at him for a second before nodding slightly. Okay, she said hesitantly. Bye. She turned and walked away, her eyebrows tilted in confusion. Fuck was that? Bakugou asked, raising an eyebrow at Hikage. He shrugged, still trying to get comfortable with the feeling of his feet back under him. Don't know her, he said simply, holding open the door. It was bad security to leave the door unlocked, even if it was the first day. Weirdo, Bakugou said, continuing with him down the busy hallway. It didn't take long to find the door, the 1A class, before any others. You gonna come in? Hikage shook his head, glancing towards the oversized door with the bright lettering. No. He walked away, back down the hall, and to the class the kid was actually in. If he had thought walking beside Bakugou had been bad, it got so much worse when he didn't have him. Somehow, the hall got even more crowded, with children yelling at each other and getting overly excited. They hadn't even made the hero course, and they still acted ridiculously. Someone bumped into him from the back, and he jumped, turning to face them. They raised a hand in apology and continued shoving their friend around away from him. His quirk would have warned him about that, if only he had it. The others could do without their quirks, but he needed to find All Might and get his own back. He opened the big door labeled 1C, just enough for him to slip in the back. He eyed the empty table, moving slowly along the side. Someone crashed into him, and he jumped, using his arms to brace himself. I saw you in the entrance exam, the person in front of him yelled. He lowered his arms and opened his eyes to a girl, her hands secured on his shoulders. She had a simple bob of brown hair, but her bangs came to a point in the middle. You have ears, he said simply, staring at the 2 small animal ears on top of her head. She laughed slightly, letting go of him to touch her ears. Yeah, it's my quirk, she explained. He knew mutant types existed. He had seen them in the boy's mind and when he was fronting, but he hadn't paid them much mind. They were not as common before he had gone to the woods. Okay. He went to walk away, but the girl grabbed his wrist and pulled him towards the center. He pulled back, his seat in the back slipping further away. No use trying to fight her, someone said, walking beside them. He had spiky blonde hair, and his ears came out into odd points. When Watanabe has you, she doesn't let you go. He looked back at the girl with the animal ears, his gaze narrowing. Like a squirrel, he commented as she continued dragging him away. The boy laughed, nodding as the girl finally let him go, right into a pile of other students. I saw you at the exam, someone yelled, others nodding in agreement. You saved that hero course girl. Lame that they didn't let you in, the long ear commented. Hikage glanced back over his shoulder at the desk, his skin crawling from this many people. Looking at Shinso, someone else asked. He decided he didn't want to join us, she explained. Hikage found the boy they meant, his unruly purple hair laying on his desk as he slept. That was all Hikage wanted to do, but he also happened to be right beside the empty desk. What's your name? The squirrel girl asked, popping up in front of him. He jumped, tightening his hands on his backpack. You good? The long ear asked, touching his shoulder. He stepped out of the touch, nodding as he bit his lip. You can go sit down if you want, someone in the group said. We can talk later. Hikage went to thank them until something tugged on the back of his mind. It was like danger sense in a way, but it was fuzzy and made his head hurt so much worse. Still, he turned on his heel, making direct eye contact with the person who walked inside. She grinned, setting her stuff on the teacher's desk silently. She walked towards the group, and Hikage shifted slightly, stepping back away from them. By the time the woman reached them, still not making a sound, he was seated in the empty desk, his backpack on the surface. What are we talking about? She asked, stepping into the group. All the eyes turned from Hikage to the newcomer, students shrieking and running to their seats. Only the squirrel girl remained, grinning at the woman. Hi, we were just introducing ourselves. She bounced onto her toes to be closer in height with the tall woman who laughed. Go sit down, Watanabe. We can do introductions in a little bit, the woman said, pushing her black hair into a ponytail. Squirrel girl nodded, running to her seat beside Longear. We all good? The woman asked, raising an eyebrow at Hikage. He frowned, trying to tuck lower into the seat. She tapped the desk beside his, her long purple nails making a nice sound. Shinso, sweetie, she asked, tapping the purple-haired boy's arm. He jumped back, his arms flying off the desk as he squinted up at her. Please try to stay awake from now. You can sleep during lunch. The boy rubbed his eyes, nodding. The teacher hummed, walking back to the front of the class. My name is Kayama, she said, leaning back on the desk with crossed arms. I am both your art teacher and your homeroom teacher. I expect a lot from you. Hikage buried his head into his lap, shutting his eyes. Do not send me out there again, Hikage groaned as he sat down, rubbing at his head. Children are awful. He dropped his head down onto the table, not caring about the response from his other holders. Nana laughed, rubbing his head as she hummed. It's good for you, she tried to argue. He waved his hand in dismissal, sighing. Who took over? He asked, turning his head to lay it on his arm. The scene of the classroom was the same, whatever user it was, looking around wildly. It's Izuku, Bruce said, his chair creaking as he leaned back in it. Nana convinced him to give it a go. Hikage hummed, turning his head back to face the table. He hadn't even made it 3 hours this morning. Izuku tried to keep his legs still in class, focusing on Miss Kayama. He was being taught by a real pro hero, and it was one of the top-ranked ones. He didn't know much about her because his mom had never actually let him watch a lot of her stuff, but the little bit he had seen of her fighting style while on matchups was amazing. The way she could control the amount of her output for situations and to not harm more, she was the exact type of hero that he longed to be one day. In the spotlight with fans and the ability to fight well, and she was his homeroom teacher. It was amazing. But he couldn't stop the nagging feeling that people were watching him, especially the purple-haired boy beside him. He had tried to keep his eyes forward, but the boy didn't stop staring. It was making Izuku's skin crawl, just being in a room with so many people. He should not have listened to Nana when she told him this would be good. The bell rang, and he grabbed his bag, booking it to the cafeteria. He had spent an hour memorizing the floor plan in case he needed to actually front today. The only good part was that Miss Kayama had taught their entire class that day because of schedule issues. He didn't have to worry about a new teacher to fawn over, not when he was still trying to dodge the purple-haired boy. He was tailing him through the hall, his quiet footsteps covered by Izuku's loud ones. If it wasn't for the flashes of purple hair, he wouldn't even know that he was being tailed. And it was horrifying. But if he switched out now, the boy would catch him, and if he went back into the plane, Nana would be disappointed. He quickened his pace, gripping his straps tighter as he turned into the big cafeteria. He spotted Kachan instantly, moving towards him. He paused when a flash of brighter yellow and red showed up, carrying trays of food. They laughed, smacking Kacchan on the back as he followed them to a table. Oh, Izuku staggered, looking between the trio. He hadn't expected Kacchan to make new friends so fast. Someone grabbed his shoulder and he jumped, biting his lip to stop from screaming in surprise. They let go quickly, their tired purple eyes falling on him. Izuku backed up in the silence, his hands fidgeting in front of him. He hadn't actually spoken to anyone his age since the DID groups. It was a younger girl who had been in the foster system, but she was still 2 years older than him. The boy didn't say anything, raising his hands in a weird gesture. Izuku's back hit someone a familiar warm hand that grabbed his wrist. He relaxed slightly, stepping back beside Kacchan. "You got an issue with the dork?" he asked, his voice lower than usual. Izuku glanced over at the two boys who had been beside Kacchan, still there, staring at the purple-haired boy. He shook his head, glancing over at Izuku before disappearing into a big crowd of students. "What was that about?" the redhead asked, moving in front of them. Izuku could feel their eyes on him, and he forced himself to smile, keeping his gaze between them. "Don't know," Kacchan said. "What the fuck happened, Zuku? I left Hikage alone for a few classes." Izuku shook his head, rubbing the back of his neck. I don't know," he answered honestly. "He wouldn't stop staring at me after I switched out." Kacchan huffed, shoving his tray into Izuku's hands. "I know Auntie packed food, but I wasn't sure who would be out and what they would like." He shrugged, leading them forward. The blonde appeared in his vision, his black lightning bolt catching Izuku's gaze. "Is that part of your quirk, or just a choice?" he asked instinctively. He had seen that weird hair mutations in the past, so it wasn't too far-fetched of an idea. The boy grinned, touching the black streak. "It's dye," he said with a shrug. "Still really cool, though. It goes with my quirk." "So it's a lightning quirk?" Izuku asked, grinning. "Is it a manipulation, or is it a generator? Does it pull from your own energy, or is it from, the static energy in the air around you?" Kacchan bopped him on the head, and he frowned, rubbing the spot with one hand. "Stop rambling, nerd," he ordered. The blonde laughed, shaking his head as he slid into a seat. "Nah, it's all good, dude. I tend to ramble a lot when I'm excited, too. My quirk actually takes form from my own energy. It's why if I make too much, I go into this, weird, stupid state. It's, all fuzzy, and I can't fully see what's happening, but it's super strong. Super strong." Izuku grinned, sliding beside Kacchan as the redhead sat beside the lightning user. "Don't encourage him," Kacchan said, putting Mom's bento on the table. Izuku laughed, nodding as he picked at the school food. It had been prepared by a pro hero, too. Lunch rush was one of the biggest changes for the homeless population, working in lunch kitchens all across the country. For him to have the time to make lunch for the kids daily was really, really cool. "Rambling," Kacchan murmured, raising an eyebrow at him. The redhead laughed, showing the sharp, shark-like teeth. "How are you two friends?" "Bad circumstances," Kacchan answered for him. "Now, what happened with the depressed-looking boy stalking you?" Izuku frowned, shaking his head. "I don't know," he said honestly. 4 got exhausted early on. My class is loud, and 7 forced me out. He was just staring at me when I finally came to." Izuku shrugged, taking a small bite. Kacchan huffed, looking him up and down. "You got to a safe place first." Izuku nodded, messing with the band he had changed after. "Why are you guys just saying random numbers?" the lightning user asked, looking between them. "Oh," Izuku said, noticing the confused faces. "We aren't. I have DID," he finally decided on. "So, they kind of use numbers instead of names?" "So, what's your number?" the redhead asked, though he didn't look any less confused. Izuku went to answer before Kacchan laughed, shaking his head. "Oh my god, you do laugh," the lightning user whispered. Izuku grinned at Kacchan's expression, glaring at the boy. "Fuck that supposed to mean?" he asked. "Maybe if your ass was actually funny, I would have laughed." The redhead put his hands between them, grinning. "School just started. Kaminari still has time to be funny." Kaminari, he assumed, put a hand to his chest, gasping loudly. "I am hilarious! You guys just don't appreciate good humor," he countered. Kacchan scoffed, shaking his head. "So, you're Kaminari?" Izuku double-checked. The boy nodded. "Yep, Donkey Kaminari," he bowed dramatically. He sat up, his head smacking the table loudly. "Ow," he muttered, rubbing his head. The redhead gave him a pitying look, chuckling. "I'm Eijiro Kirishima," he introduced himself. "I'm assuming you're in Class 1B? Izuku flushed, shaking his head. "No, I'm in General Studies. 1C. I'm Izuku Midoriya." He rubbed at his neck. Kirishima went to say something, but Kacchan huffed. He's being fucking modest. He sat back, his fork with leftover katsudon hanging over his bento. The principal is privately training him. The two other boys' eyes went wide as they stared at Izuku. Really? Kaminari gasped. I didn't know he actually took students. Dude, that's amazing. Can you help tutor me before tests? How are you not in the hero course? Kirishima asked. That's an awesome quirk. Super smarts is killer to have. Izuku shook his head quickly. Oh, no, that's not my quirk, he corrected, waving his hands in the air. Oh, Kaminari hummed. Then what's your quirk? Izuku hesitated, looking down at his hands. I'm actually quirkless, he managed to stutter out. This is always where people just stop talking to him, even after learning about his DID. It was quiet for a moment, and Izuku looked up at the two, exchanging looks. Is that a fucking problem to you two? Kacchan asked, crossing his arms. I'll be some sense into you if it is. Kirishima's eyes went wide as he shook his head. That's not it. It's just, that's sick, Kaminari said with a laugh. You're the principal's personal student, and you don't even have a quirk. I couldn't dream of being that smart, even without my quirk malfunctioning. Izuku's eyes widened at the response before he smiled and nodded. I guess, he muttered, grinning at the two boys. Nana and Mom would be so happy to hear he had more friends. Okay, what Watanabe and oh my god, I don't remember if I gave the long-eared boy a name. They are technically not OCs. I don't really do OC characters, and I can't get like attached to them. But they were in the background of some shots, I believe, during the sports festival when 1C was setting up. They were in the background of that, so that's where I kind of pulled them from. Okay. Hikage's danger sense. So I know I've said before that it's still there, just kind of fuzzy. And it is, but not really for, like, situations like a backpack flying at him. And when Nana used it when they were dealing with the bullies, it wasn't really a purposeful use of it. It was more, hey, I need to get this done. If we don't, Izuku's in danger, kind of thing, which is why it activated. Okay, so I said I was gonna move away from canon, but I don't really think I did. It sucks, but it's something I struggle with, so I will get there eventually. Let's see if there's any comments I wanna okay, so I do love Hitoshi. I love Hitoshi. He's like in all my stories. He's just fun to write. This one, he is a little bit different, and people will hate him or they will love him, whatever. Hopefully I'll like him, but if you don't, it's, yeah. Yes, more friends for Izuku. Lovely. Okay, so, I'm not actually gonna count on that one because it's, okay, what's going on? Yeah. Okay, I'm sorry, there's a lot happening here. I don't think there's anything else other than those ones. Like, I love these ones, and the next one will deal more with Shinso, I believe. We'll get an answer with that. Anyways, the next one is called School Relationships, and I will see you all in that one.